Hello and welcome back to the Ascent Cycling Podcast for our review of the 2021 Giro d'Italia. I am once again joined by my co-host, Mr. Joe Timms. How are you today?
Very well, thank you, Guillaume. How are you?
I'm very fine. I'm very fine. A bit disappointed because I woke up today thinking I'm gonna launch GCN and watch the Giro, and then I remembered that I didn't have GCN, but also there was no Giro, so that was a bit of a sad moment. But no, we're going to review this Giro, a very interesting Grand Tour, probably like the most fun Grand Tour we always have every year. Not the most prestigious one, obviously that is the place of the Tour de France, but usually the Giro always has the sparks, and everyone likes the Giro, and this year was no different. With Egan Bernal winning the Giro d'Italia on his first participation, making him a Grand Tour or two-time Grand Tour winner, Tour de France and Giro. He is, I believe, the one of the only three riders of this century to have won the Giro on their first take. The last one to do so was his fellow countryman, Nairo Quintana, in 2014. But I would say it was a dominant performance from Egan Bernal, who never really looked in difficulty except for that one stage in Sigadiara.
Yeah, I mean, for 16 stages, it looked like it could be a foregone conclusion. He looked like by far the strongest GC rider for, those first 16 stages. Then Sega Diala came. He cracked Simon Yates, gained over a minute back on Egan Bernal that day. And it looked like we may have a real race on our hands. But no, Bernal fought hard. He fought really hard, even though he did lose some time to Yates and a few others over the next couple of stages, but in small amounts. And yeah, he never really looked like losing the Maglia Racer.
There were indeed no doubts. Yates could have probably came back, and Yates still ends up on the podium. A very good Grand Tour for him. Gone quite under the radar, if we're being honest, throughout the entire 3 weeks. The final week potentially a bit more exposure as he got a stage win, and that he tried to drop Egan Bernal. But what do you make of Yates' Grand Tour? Do you think after those 3 weeks, do you think coming back home in Britain, he's going to be disappointed with how he performed?
I think he'll be so. I think Yates entered the race wanting to win the Giro. He wasn't aiming for a podium finish. So, in that sense, I think he's going to be slightly disappointed. But, he had a poor first 16 stages, really. He looked good on the Zoncolan, but he really was quite quiet, like you said. We expected to see him attacking left, right, and centre. He did come to life a little bit in the final week or so, but I don't know. A stage win and a podium is a really great result, but I think Yates came here to win the Giro, so I'm not sure if he'll be too overly ecstatic about his Giro d'Italia.
I don't think so either. I'm leaning towards your point of view here, Joe. One rider that has to be mentioned. I think we've had quite a lot of feel good stories on this Giro. One of them is another Italian rider from NTT we'll mention about later. But Damiano Caruso, second of this Giro, his first ever Grand Tour podium, in a scenario that is absolutely mental. He came here solely to help his leader, Mikel Landa, who we all know and love, and has never been able to win a Grand Tour. But many thought that this year could have been his season. We had doubts on Bernal, we had potential doubts on Simon Yates, and we all knew that Mikel Landa could have done it. And sadly, in, I believe, Cittadella, or Cattolica? Yeah, in Cattolica, Mikel Landa met the pavement, and it was love at first sight as he decided to withdraw from the race. Mikel Landa was indeed freed from, the Giro, and it allowed Caruso to enter a role he's never really had in his career, and to many surprise, he held on to P2 of the Giro, and a deserved P2 as well. He didn't just lose time every single day. He was there in the battle, even during an unbelievable stage 20, in which he got his first ever stage win on a Grand Tour. Damiano Caruso, P2 of the Giro d'Italia. What a story.
Yeah, it was such a nice story to see Caruso do so well. And I think I checked his pre-race odds. He was 500 to 1 to win the Giro d'Italia before the race began. So that just proves what a story it is not to have won a single World Tour race before the Giro started. And now look at how well he has done at the Giro here. He was by far the rider who pressed Egan Bernal the most over the course of the 3 weeks. He was only 1.5 minutes down on Bernal in the end. He was almost there or thereabouts. So consistent every single day. I don't remember him having a single real day off at the Giro, to be honest, single bad day. He seems very consistent throughout. And there was one image of him where he patted Bilbao after Pale Bilbao had pulled him to the Alpenmotor on that stage 20. What an image that was, because, Caruso has been in that domestique role his entire career. He's done what Bilbao has done for him at this race, and he knows how crucial that ride was by Bilbao. And to lose Maida, to lose Landa, it was gutting when Landa left the race because he looked great the day before. But, there is a shining light in the story, and that is that Caruso has really been able to show how good a cyclist he is.
Is he going to just settle back as a teammate as he's been in his entire life, or is he going to want to maybe once again have a shot at a Grand Tour for the upcoming seasons? I mean, he is still, I believe, on the contract with Baron Victorious. Baron Victorious led by Mikel Landa and Pello Bilbao, but you can have a third leader. Is Caruso once again going to go for a GC in your opinion?
I think he should be allowed the opportunity. Why not after this season? I mean, Landa, sure, he is the team leader. He remains that in that role for sure, I would say, in the GC. But Bilbao, they've got Jack Hay, Kuta Pools as well. Caruso has proven, that he's atop of that bunch. So I feel like behind Landa, Caruso has to be the name to go to for a GC role. At least put him in a joint leadership role with Landa, with Bilbao. They have many options, and this Bahrain team have a very strong mountain lineup right now, that is for sure.
They have, and they had one of the most interesting lineup at the start of the Giro. Sadly, they did lose Mikel Landa, they lost Matej Mohoric, and they lost Gino Maida, and yet they've managed to win I believe, the award of fair play with only 5 riders. So that is to be uploaded as well. A very clean race from Bahrain Victorious all along. But moving on to the rest of our GC top 10. In 4th place, we're going to have Alexander Vlasov from Astana Premier Tech. 6 minutes 40 behind Egan Bernal, already some huge gaps. The Russian, who last year tried twice to go for a Grand Tour GC. He went for the Giro, had some, I believe, intestinal issues, and then on the Vuelta had some leg issues early on. A nice 4th place, and probably the Grand Tour in which Vlasov has confirmed the hopes that were on him.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a solid race from Vlasov. I think he should be happy with 4th. I'm not sure if he will be. I remember speaking to him at the Astana Premier Tech pre-season press conference, and he basically said that he wants to win the Giro. That's his goal for the season, to win the Giro d'Italia. He's finished 4th. It's a fair effort. He's over 6 minutes down on Egan Bernal. He never really looked like challenging to win the race. In that sense, I think he may be a little disappointed. The gap to, for example, Caruso and him. Caruso seems to be quite consistently ahead of Vlasov on the summit finishes. So, I think Vlasov, he can take a lot from this race. By far his best GC performance at a Grand Tour. We have to remember, it's only his 2nd World Tour season as well. So he's come out of nowhere, and he's really delivering for Astana and proving he can lead a Grand Tour team. And I think he'll get a podium sooner or later at a Grand Tour. I mean, unbelievable. Like you say, no other word to describe Martinez's race here in Italy. He won a stage at the Tour last year. Obviously, he was picked up by the Ineos Grenadiers, and he was invaluable to Bernal. I really feel that. And that was shown on a couple of occasions. Stage 20, we saw just how strong he is. He was the third rider to cross the line that day, only behind Caruso and Bernal, after leading Bernal and the rest of the guys up that final climb, dropping off one by one. We saw Yates, Almeida, Vlasov, all the GC guys slowly drop away from Martinez's rhythm. But most importantly for me was stage 17, Sega Diala, when we finally saw Egan Bernal crack. And that was the moment Martinez, I think, was absolutely crucial. The way he supported Bernal and the way he turned around, gave him a few fist pumps, tried to G him up, get him ready for the final few kilometers and say, come on, we can do this. And that mental support as well as the physical support, which was unreal on both sides for Martinez at this Giro. So what a rider. And he's at the end of the Grenadiers, so it's hard to see him leading a Grand Tour, but I think he's shown right now in his career that he's capable of doing so.
Absolutely. And what I have to say regarding Dan Martinez is that when we announced when Ineos announced their start list, for me, the super domestic / co-leader of Ineos would have been Pavel Sivakov, who had the occasion to run for a GC, I believe, 2 years ago on the Giro d'Italia alongside Togo Gennard, and never really proved his worth because he crashed. And this year could have been the year where he either acted like the perfect domestic for Bernal, or if Bernal had recurring back pain, like it had been suggested early on in the race, Sivakov could have that leadership position. However, in true Pavel Sivakov manner, he crashed. And that allowed Dan Martinez to prove his worth, exactly like Damino Caruso at a lower level, sure. But, I mean, that stage in Segadiala is it's a classic, and the devotion, the commitment to your leader, it's unbelievable. Dan Martinez, I hope he's gonna have the chance to lead a Grand Tour in the future. I'm not sure. As you said, he rides for Ineos, and Ineos every year is linked to having more climbers going their way. I mean, we've had Vlasov a couple of minutes ago, but Vlasov has been heavily linked to a move with the Grenadiers. So we'll see what holds the future for Dan Martinez. But what I do know about his future is that I think it's quite bright.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that was one of the images of the Giro for me. That moment he turned around on the Segadiala to Bernal. There's an unbelievable photo of that moment. So I think that's definitely one of my moments of the Giro. But just behind Martinez, and I mean just behind Martinez by less than a second in the GC, was Joao Almeida of Koenig Quickstep. And I don't think, Guillaume, either of us would have predicted that until just a few days ago, because he dropped 4 minutes on stage 4 to Sestala, and his GC was done, it seemed, at that point. He was working for Remco over the next 10 days or so. Obviously, Remco faded quite quickly in the second week, and by that point, Joao Almeida was over 10 minutes down overall, and he really fought hard to get back a good GC position, overtaking the likes of Bardet, Hugh Carthy, riders who've had a solid race, and Almeida was one of the best climbers, 100% in this Giro in that final week. What do you make of Almeida's race?
I would use it in one word, evolution, because at the start of the race, stage 4, which was the first key race for the GC, he dropped, and that was a leg issue. I mean, I think he was like not malnourished, but he had a deficit in sugar. I think it was that, and he got stuck to Remco Evenepoel, which is a decision that I don't think was the right one, in my opinion. But only time could have told. Sorry, if that had been right. Remco did leave the race after a crash and also a few disappointments stage-wise. And then his final week, Joao Almeida's final week, is absolutely unreal. I mean, he finished 6th in Cortina d'Ampezzo. He finished 2nd at Sigadiala, 2nd at the Alpe di Mera, 5th in Alpe Mota, and 5th of the time trial in Milan. That is, out of the final 6 stages, he finished 5 times in the top 5. And that is consistency. I did say in, I believe, yesterday's podcast that he had been allowed to go in the breakaway thanks to his position in the GC, which I still believe is true. However, it is true he didn't gain that much time through those breakaway. He was allowed to go, but he never was in one of those breakaways that gained a huge amount of time. So it just showed that Joao Almeida's legs on the final week were as good, or just slightly under as good as the one of Bernal or Yates. So very, very strong third week. And just like Vlasov, a proof that he can hold on for 3 weeks. And as he's looking for a contract, prove that a team can back him as a GC leader for the coming years.
Yeah, for sure. And he was fourth at the Giro last year, and he's sixth this year. So you think a regression in terms of his final place. But I feel like his stock has risen since the beginning of the Giro. You know, his contract is up. He's leaving to Koenig. He's going to be a hot, hot signing for someone. There's going to be a lot of teams interested in Joao Almeida, that's for sure. And he still looks for his first professional win, like you mentioned, a couple of second places, many top fives in that final week. And I think he's got to get that sooner or later. And I think he's going to ride La Vuelta this season, Guillaume. And I think if he's given the full leadership role there, which I think he should be given that chance after his Giro d'Italia performance, we could definitely at least see him get his first pro win at La Vuelta later in the year.
Moving on to seventh position of the GC and the rider who lost the most positions in the top 10 after that time trial, Romain Bardet, who was leading the team DSM for the first time, and also during the Giro for the first time, the French rider who had always been Age de Zer la Mondiale, Tour de France. That was the two guarantees with Romain Bardet. This year, new team, new surroundings, new race, and I think kind of, well, quite similar to Romain Bardet's image. It was up and downs, slightly more downs than ups, but the two major ups were on Cortina d'Ampezzo, where he finished with Damiano Caruso, and on that penultimate stage where he tried alongside once again Damiano Caruso to go and get that maiden Giro win. Sadly, he just couldn't beat the Italian rider. But overall, I wouldn't think it's a bad Giro for Romain Bardet.
Yeah, I think a very solid race for Bardet. He's struggled a lot in the last few years, hasn't he? He had that double podium at the Tour 2 years in a row. Since then, his career has gone really downhill and he's struggled, like I said, numerous seasons now. So really a solid race for him to get back on track. He's finished the Giro, got a solid top 10, almost won a stage, like you said, on stage 20, and proven that he is really back at the top of his game. So I think Bardet can only take positives from this Giro d'Italia. So PA of the Giro this season was Hugh Carthy, and he came into the race after his first Grand Tour podium last year at La Vuelta a España. I mean, he showed some signs of promise early on in particular. Over the first 2 weeks of the race, he looked pretty solid on numerous stages, but I think he really fell away in week 3. After the final rest day, he really didn't perform to his best abilities. And again, on the time trial, he finished behind Romain Bardet when he really, I'd have had Carthy overtaking Bardet on paper, based on their previous time trial abilities, but he finished behind Bardet on the time trial, dropped further behind the Frenchman to only finish in 8th place overall. So it's not the best race from Carthy. What do you make of it, Guillaume?
I'm quite disappointed, if I'm being honest. I'm quite disappointed because I had expected Hugh Carthy to perform in the Zoncolan and Segadiala, and because those are climbs that, in my eyes, suited the British rider from EF, and there was a lot of expectations after his Vuelta of last year, and this was the first race where, in my mind, I considered him a GC contender. Um, First 2 weeks were decent; he was there or thereabouts, but then Zoncolan showed the first sign of weakness, and then Cortina d'Ampezzo, where his team paced throughout the entire day, and as you mentioned, EF has done a very, very solid Giro. The likes of Alberto Bettiol, I mean, we'll talk probably about him in a couple of minutes, but Alberto Bettiol, unreal. Ruben Guerrero, until he was still in the Giro, unreal. But then Hugh Carthy just dipped. The final, 3-4 days of Hugh Carthy, starting in Segadiala, where he got dropped by Alberto Bettiol, technically, in the climb as it started, was somewhat of a surprise. And he ends up in 8th position. I'm not exactly happy with it. I don't think he's happy with it either. But I mean, he's still 26, right? He may be going to the Vuelta later this year. We're not sure yet of his program, but I'm just, yeah, a bit underwhelmed with his performances. But there's some potential here.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And I think a man who I'm not underwhelmed with was ninth place Tobias Foss for Jumbo Visma. We came into the race, and George Bennett, I think we would have said, was their clear leader. Perhaps, maybe we've seen Foss before perform well. And, we thought maybe he could play some kind of role, but he really quickly became their out-and-out GC leader with Bennett dropping away. Koen Bouwman as well, notably had a good race for Jumbo Visma, particularly in the 3rd week. But Tobias Foss was their GC man very consistent, and he was just a little behind that group of riders we just mentioned. In the end, he tried to hold on in the big mountain stages, but he just, I think, leaked a little too much time to really try and challenge for the top five. But again, he's proven he's a really great time trialist, and for the first time in his career, I think he's only 24 still. The Norwegian has proven that he can lead a team at a Grand Tour as well.
Absolutely. And I think we've mentioned Almeida dropping 4 minutes on Sestola and then being stuck to babysitting duties. Tobias Foss lost 1.5 minutes on Bernal on Sestola because he had to babysit George Bennett. And I mean, I don't think that would have improved his position because I think he's like 3 minutes behind Hugh Carthy comes the end of this Giro. But he was able to move into that leading position at the Giro with Jumbo Visma and to hold his ground against some of the best in cycling. And yeah, for the 24-year-old Norwegian rider from UnoX, or I mean former UnoX, he's had a very very solid race. And I believe we were saying during the race predictions on the first race day that Jumbo Visma had Roglic, Van Aert, and then their next massive rider or the next hope for me was Tobias Foss, and I think he managed to prove within those 3 weeks that he is the third best option for Jumbo Visma.
Yeah, potentially. And he really impressed me on stage 11 to Montalcino when we saw the likes of Evenepoel get dropped, the likes of Ciccone get dropped as well. Bardet too on a stage that you think would really suit him. But Tobias Foss didn't, and he was able to stay with the very front GC guys, just with Vlasov, Caruso, Simon Yates as well. And yeah, a really versatile rider, I feel. Maybe he can. He's not really a pure climber, and I feel like that's where he needs to work if he wants to win a Grand Tour one day, in his pure climbing ability. But it seems he has pretty much everything else down to a T right now.
I think he does. I think he does. And I was looking at his results on this Giro. He's quite a consistent rider. I mean, he's only been in the top 10 twice on this Giro, but he was quite often in the top 20. And I think you have to applaud that kind of consistency because a young rider, as he leads his Grand Tour for the first time, can usually have like that one day off where everything is gone. I mean, we've had Remco Evenepoel having one, for example. Sure, he's a bit younger, but Tobias Foss didn't. Tobias Foss didn't, and he held on to that ninth place beautifully. Shout outs as well to Kun Boomen and George Bennett. Boomen more than Bennett. I feel like Boomen surprised me more. But yeah, an unbelievable performance by the Norwegian. Ninth place, just ahead of Dan Martin, who wraps up the top 10. 18 minutes down on Egan Bernal for the Irishman. A stage win, making him a winner on all three Grand Tours following his win in Sega Diala. A tough race for him. I mean, he lost all hope of any GC result following the stage in Montalcino where he dropped more than 9 minutes, being dropped on literally the first Stradetto. But managed to be in a few breakaways, got a stage win and a top 10 at GC. I don't think he's happy with the finishing position, but I think he can be happy with how the race has unfolded following Montalcino.
Yeah, I think he'll be happy with the stage win. He's completed the trilogy, like you say, of the stage victory at each Grand Tour now. So, Martin's going to be, I think, pretty happy with that. I don't think he really expected to challenge for the GC. He did really well at La Vuelta last year, but when he came out and said that he wasn't really willing to take the risks on the Montalcino stage, on the gravel sectors, it proves to me that he's not really all in 110% to try and get a GC result. So I think he'll be happy with the stage win. And I think if you'd offered 10th place in a stage win, a really nice stage win on Sega Diala, the first time it's at the Giro as well, I think Dan Martin would have probably taken that quite quickly at the beginning of the race.
Yeah, I'd like to agree. I would think that that is something he would have been happy with. Sure, last year he had a good Vuelta, as you said, but I think in his mind he knows that he's not exactly the Grand Tour contender. But yeah, overall a strong performance from Dan Martin and a strong top 10. I mean, there is 20 minutes between P1 and P10, which is rather massive. We're now going to move on to the winners of each classification, and then have a few things that happened during this Euro where we liked, where we didn't. But first of all, Chiclamino jersey. Peter Sagan finally wins it.
He finally does. He finally wins it, and now he's won a points jersey at a Grand Tour that isn't the Tour de France. Still looking for the Vuelta jersey, like we mentioned a few daily recaps ago. That could be a big goal for Sagan now, even though it may be slightly more difficult to win. But I think after he won his stage on stage 10, it looked like Sagan would never really lose the jersey. Chimolai and Gaviria were there, but never really challenged either. They never really made it too difficult for Sagan. So, yeah, Sagan gets the Chiclamino jersey. He was the big favourite beforehand. There's no real surprise to see him win it, I don't think.
He could have potentially lost it had there been more sprinters not withdrawing, and also if those sprinters had potentially not like spread the wins in the first week or so, because we've had quite some hard fought sprint stages. Caleb Ewan was like the main sprinter. He's actually the only rider on this Giro with Egan Bernal that won twice, and Filippo Ganna, my bad. But Tim Merlier won the inaugural sprint. The third stage that should have been a sprint had been won by a breakaway. Stage 5 was a sprint. Ewan 7. Ewan and then I think like we had two more sprints. Peter Sagan winning in Foligno in a stage that disappointed quite a lot of people on the internet because Nizzolo had been dropped and we all had expected him to win. But then Twitter and the whole world of cycling was happy on stage 13 with Giacomo Nizzolo taking his first win on the Giro, ending a drought of 11 runner-up places on his own Grand Tour. I mean, he finally got his stage, and then after that, he was like, "I'm gonna retire. I'm gonna withdraw from the race, not retire, not yet."
Literally, yeah. I feel like it was a great Giro, but a Giro really of a lot of feel good stories as well. And Nizzolo's win definitely was one of those. So happy to finally see it. It felt like his very last opportunity as well. That was, I mean, it was definitely his last opportunity to win a stage this year at the Giro at least. And I mean, we said before that stage, Guillaume, we expected yet another second place from Nizzolo, and it somehow wouldn't go his way again. But so happy to see him finally get that win. And the way he won it as well, he lost his lead out man. He just went for it in the wind, and he blew all the other sprinters away. So that is definitely one of my favourite moments of the Giro, Nizzolo getting his stage win.
Feel good stories indeed. I mean, Caruso, Nizzolo, and another one, another Italian, ending in O. Lorenzo Fortunato, the rider from Eolo Cometa, invited him on the Giro. Some said that that invite was solely due to the connection of the team, obviously being Alberto Contador's team and Evan Basso. And they entered the Giro as a massive question mark. We didn't really know much of their team. We knew a couple of their riders, the likes of Manuele Belletti, the likes of Francesco Gavazzi. But one rider that really sparked everyone was Lorenzo Fortunato. He had been crowned as the Eolo Cometa, not GC leader, but the riders whose GC hopes of the team would rely on in the upcoming year. He is 26 years old, has to be mentioned, so he's not exactly the youngest, but he really did surprise everyone. And I mean, he won on the almighty Monte Zoncolan, and I think we all praised his win. Uh, Most of us were also quite disappointed because we would have liked to see a GC guy or like a big name winning at the Zoncolan. But Lorenzo Fortunato taking the win out of the breakaway, beating the likes of Bauke Mollema, beating the likes of George Bennett, winning ahead of Jan Tratnik. What a win and what a story for that small team of Eolo Cometa.
Yeah, it really was a great moment for them. And a lot of people wrote them off really before the race began, saying, why this team here? They don't deserve an invite. They're here just because Contador's involved, Basso's involved, and just because of money, basically, and they don't have the team for it. But they proved those doubters wrong 100%. Fortunato, like you say, really a breakout star, I'd say, even though he is a little older. He's 26 years old, like you say, Guillaume. Yeah, he can definitely climb, and it'll be interesting to see what he does going forward as well. I don't think he's raced many World Tour races before this Giro in his career, so I wonder what we'll see him doing next. And I'm not sure if he's going to be Grand Tour GC contending potential in the future. I somehow doubt that a little, but we'll see. Maybe he'll surprise me.
I think there's hope that he'll surprise us. I mean, he was very consistent in that final week. 12th in Segadiala, not out of a break. Top 10 on the Alpe Mota, again, not out of a break. And a P16 in the GC. I believe he's lost 2 places on the final time trial. So he'll have to work on that. I believe he was at like bottom 4 of the inaugural time trial of this Giro. One thing that I did not know, he's been actually on the Contador's wing since 2016. That's when he joined Tinkoff. And then he's always been following Alberto Contador. So he's had a very good role model to grow up and become the rider he is. So I think we can expect big things from Lorenzo Fortunato in the future.
Yeah, definitely, and it'll be interesting to see if Contador does in fact ride from Milan to Madrid, which he claimed he would if his team got a stage win. So we wait to see that.
We're going to move on to our team of the Giro. There's a few riders we haven't mentioned, but we'll do like a things that we like, things that we disliked podcast on this Giro. But yeah, 8 riders to pick out of the 184 riders that started this Giro d'Italia. Joe, who is your leader of your team?
Egan Bernal.
All right, no explanation. And you know what? I'm happy with it because I too have Egan Bernal. I mean, can you go against Egan Bernal if we're being honest? I don't
I
know
don't
if you
think
can.
so. I think it's the obvious pick, right? We've got to have him as our leader of our little team here.
I'd like to agree. At least my Velo games should have done that.
Yeah.
Because let's not talk about Velo games. Mr. Joe, I'm going to need you to give me your first super domestique.
I shall go for Alberto Bettiol, actually, of EF. I think what a race he had, climbing like I've never seen him before, can ride on all terrains, can go and win a stage if you want as well. So Bettiol is definitely in my team.
And give me your second super domestique.
I shall go for Filippo Ganna, actually. I feel like, I don't know, is he a super domestique? Yeah, in this case he is. I feel like we can have him in the team. Bettiol can climb a little better than him, supposedly, from what we've seen at this race. And I think Ganna, he can do it all, and he can ride in the front for pretty much the entire race if you need him to.
Okay, so we have one rider in common. I too have Alberto Bettiol as one of my super domestics for all the reasons you've mentioned. I, however, do not have Filippo Ganna, at least not here. I've got Daniel Martinez as my super domestic. I feel like I need a domestic in the mountain terrain. And I mean, who else than Dan Martinez? I could have gone Caruso, but I feel like it would be offensive towards him to pick him as a domestic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've gone Dan Martinez. I think he was the best domestic in the mountain aspect. You could have gone Kuhn Boomen as well. But I've gone for the Colombian. Moving on.
Should have gone Remco, mate.
Should have gone Joao Almeida, you mean? Obviously, because once again, I mean, he did overperform on this Giro d'Italia. But Joe, I'm going to need you for a sprinter now.
My lead sprinter, I'm going to go for Giacomo. Giacomo Nizzolo. Is he yours?
He is mine.
Yeah, we can't pick past him. You know, to finally get his first win. I don't care if he wins one stage or two, like Caleb Ewan. Nizzolo's stage win is worth it.
Yep, exactly. Just for the feel good stories, I won't have Nizzolo in my team because he's the GOAT. Moving on to our fifth rider, I'm going to need to find a road captain. Joe, who do you have?
Road captain, a difficult one for me. I've got 2 to pick from. I've got Paul Martins and Peter Seri. Peter Seri's probably a slightly better rider at this point, but I think Paul Martins has now retired following the Giro. It was his final race in pro cycling, so I'm going to go for Paul Martins of Jumbo-Visma.
Interesting. Very interesting. This is where I have Filippo Ganna. I could have expected you to pick Salvatore Puccio. I think he also fits in that kind of category with Paul Martins and Peter Seri, of just riders that are there that kind of like the Luc Rowe of the Tour de France or the Christian Knies a couple of years ago. But Paul Martins, okay. And it's a nice tribute to a rider who has now finished his career. Moving on to our sixth rider, I'm going to need an escape artist, a rider that goes in the breakaways and have fun.
There's 2 for me. There's Simon Pello, who I think was in the breakaways the most at the Giro this year, but I'm going to go for Dries de Bont because Alpecin Phoenix rider, he just didn't stop attacking, and he actually, what I liked about him is he actually tried to challenge and get some points in all the intermediate sprints, all the KOMs as well, even though he kind of let Bouchard take some points ahead of him. Quite strange if you ask me, but I like that about Dries de Bont, and I think he was in the breakaways non-stop, so I'll go for him.
Yeah, he also did win Super Combatif of the Giro and the classification of the intermediate sprints, which is also why I have Dries de Bont as my escape artist on this team. I believe we've got 4 riders in common now. I think
quite a few.
Actually, we've got 5. I think the only rider I don't have right now is Paul Martins. So that's fun. Who is your wild card?
My wild card is a rider who should have been given the chance to lead the team throughout the race, and that is Joao Almeida. Is my wild card of this team.
Okay. I've gone Lorenzo Fortunato. Again, feel good story, and he wanted Zoncola Naha to slap him in that 8-man lineup. speaking of 8 man, I'm gonna need you I'm gonna need you, sorry, to give me your 8 man.
And the final rider is it a hype man?
I believe it is. It's a rider that like gives you support. The rider that will probably crack a few jokes in the team bus, but will also be quite serious when it comes to the race and just be there if you need it.
So it's a rider that I think could have fit into the escape artist category in most races, but not here. Because Thomas, again, wasn't in the breakaways very often, but he is going to be my hype man simply because of his Twitter activity. Even when the Giro d'Italia race was still on, obviously he's withdrawn from the race now. He's hyping up his teammate at the Dauphiné, Brent van Meer, for winning the first stage there, calling him the new Thomas de Gent. So I feel like, he's a man all about the team, and Thomas de Gent is my hype man.
All right. He is, however, like the biggest hype man there is on Twitter. He's a massive fanboy of Brent van Meer. He's actually his number one fan. And rounding up my top 10, I do not have Thomas de Gent. I have a rider whose first name is probably the best first name we've had in cycling in a long time. I have Taco van der Hoorn. I mean, we had to mention him in this review. Won stage 3, beating the entire peloton. And I mean, what a race he's had. What a story. The rider that got dropped by Jumbo Visma went to Intermarché once he got there, won his first ever Grand Tour win and World Tour stage on this Giro, which was a recovering team actually. 10 breakaways have won on this Giro. A lot of them were first time winners, the likes of Victor Lafay, Mauro Schmidt, Taco van der Hoorn. And I mean, just for his win, just for the fact that he's a very sound guy, I had to go for Taco van der Hoorn.
That was one of the best stages when Taco van der Hoorn crested that final little peak, and the sprinters all just, you see Sakin sprinting behind, clearly not getting there as Taco just sat up and celebrated with 50 meters to go. That's one of the images I'll remember from this Giro for sure. So we hope you guys enjoyed our Giro d'Italia review here at Ascent. We very much enjoyed creating the pods around the Giro, and if you have enjoyed, make sure you hit like, drop sub on the channel if you're new. Follow if you're listening on a podcast player, as well as leaving a good review. All of that good stuff really helps us out massively. So that is very much appreciated. And Guillaume, do you have a final word today?
I only have one. Arrivederci and grazie Italia.
Grazie.